Need computer training for a group or office? Contact us today to get a free demo of our training at www.teachucomp.com/enterprise-licensing.
The lasso tools let you draw either freeform selections with curves or straight edge selections for irregular polygonal selection shapes. The magnetic lasso tool is a really neat selection tool that allows the selection's border to snap to the pixelated edges of an element of the image as you trace. This can be very useful for selecting objects with complex, irregular edges set against a high contrast background. Because each tool behaves differently, we'll have to look at how you can use each tool in the set on an individual basis. But let's start by examining the lasso tool. To use the lasso tool, first select it from the toolbox. If you right-click, you'll see that it shares a spot with the polygonal and the magnetic lasso tool that we'll be looking at shortly. Just give it a click to select it. Now, up in the options bar, just as we had with our marquee tools, you have a few selections. The first thing that you want to make sure is that you have the proper type of selection chosen. We want a new selection, so we'll click that. You can select feathering and anti-aliasing selections as well. To then create a selection using the lasso tool, you just click and drag with the mouse to draw a freehand selection. You trace the outline of the area that you wish to select, making sure that you drag it back to the origin or the starting point. If you release the mouse before dragging it back to the starting point, Photoshop will draw a straight line from where you stop dragging back to the origin point for you. So let's take a look at this. To use this, you would just click and then drag to start drawing. Now what you'll see very quickly is that you really have to have a steady hand to use this tool. One slip like this of your hand is going to do that to your selection. If you release the mouse, it's going to draw a straight line back to your point of origin. So let's select and then deselect. In the image that we have here, we have a lot of straight lines. We want to isolate this DVD package that we have. Well, what do? In this case, if you want to draw a straight line as you're drawing, you can hold down the Alt key on your keyboard and click from where you want the line to begin to where you want it to stop to create a straight line. And this will draw straight lines between the points that you click. It will also add a fastening point where you click to hold the selection in place. So let's look at this. So we can give our image a click to start. Hold down the Alt key and you'll see that we're drawing a straight line here. Wherever we click, we're going to add a fastening point and it's going to be a nice clean straight line. What do we do on the edges here? Well, we can just very easily go around these corners and click to add more fastening points. Now at any point, if you add a fastening point and you want to delete it, you can just press delete on your keyboard while you're still holding down the Alt key to remove that last fastening point at the last place that you clicked. We want another straight line all the way down and click again to add our fastening points. Another straight line. You'll see how much easier this is on an image like this. So it really does depend on the image and what you're trying to select. Once you're done, you just release the Alt key and you've made your selection with the lasso tool. Now to use the polygonal lasso tool, let's look at that. Let's select and then deselect. You click that in the toolbox to select it. And then once again in the options bar, you can select the type of selection that you want to make, just as you did with the marquee tools. Now to use this tool, you just click from point to point where you want to draw a straight line. So that's all you draw with this, is a straight line. Now once again, you want to end by clicking on the initial starting point of your selection. With this tool, you'll see a small circle next to the lasso tool when you're over that starting point. So this one, you don't hold down the Alt key. This does basically the same thing we just did. You add your fastening points all the way around. Go very quickly. Again, if you add one, you don't really like that, you can click delete to remove that fastening point. Add some more. So with the polygonal lasso tool, remember that when we get back to that point of origin, you will see a very small circle appear right next to the tool there. That tells you you're back at the point of origin. You give it a click, and that's how you close your selection using the polygonal lasso tool. Now, also, like the lasso tool, if you hold down the Alt key on your keyboard, you can draw a freehand line until you release the Alt key. So this is the inverse of the behavior of the lasso tool in that case. Now let's look at the magnetic lasso tool. Now remember, this is good for an image where you want to make a selection that's against a high contrast background. So let's take a look at a different image. In this case, our orange flower image. And we want to select the big orange flower here in the middle. And it is against this high contrast or this white background. So we're going to play around with the magnetic lasso tool. Let's go ahead and select it, right click, give it a click to select it. And then let's look up in the options bar. Now the first few options are the same that you can set for the other selection tools. However, the magnetic lasso tool has a few more options after anti-alias. The first is the width check box here. And in that box, you can type a pixel range from the pointer within which the magnetic lasso tool will look for the border of the item of which it's tracing. Next, you can set the edge contrast, and that's set as a percentage. What this does is it sets the sensitivity of the magnetic lasso tool to variations in the contrast between pixels, which is how this tool finds the edges of image elements. So setting a higher percentage sets the tool to only find edges that sharply contrast with their surroundings, whereas a lower number detects lower contrast variations in color. Then we have frequency, and this text box allows you to input a number between 0 and 100. A high value increases the frequency with which the magnetic lasso tool sets its fastening points for the edge of the image element as you trace its border. Finally, if you're using a stylus tablet, you can check or uncheck the pen pressure checkbox to the right of that. If it's checked, an increase on the pen pressure causes the edge width setting to decrease. So these are settings that you really just kind of have to play with depending on the image and the selection that you're trying to make. If you find that it's not really snapping to the edges like, you might need to increase or decrease your contrast. If you want to increase or decrease the frequency of the fastening points, you can change that as well. But once you have those settings in place, you can then just click and drag the pointer of the magnetic lasso tool around the border of the image element that you're trying to select. As you do this, it will add those fastening point anchors where it discerns the edges of the objects. If at any point it adds a point that you'd rather not have, again, you can just press delete on your keyboard to delete the fastening points that you've created as you drag. Then you can drag back to the origin point. So let's do this. Just click and drag. And if your settings are right, you can go fairly quickly to make your selections. You can drag all the way around. Now, you can also manually click at any point as you're dragging to manually set a fastening point. You may need to do this in crevices or corners of the image element, just depending on what you're working with. So I can just click to manually add a fastening point if I want. Drag it back to the beginning, When you do, you'll see the small circle appear. Give it a click to close it, and then you'll have your selection using the magnetic lasso tool.
Like what you see? Get a free demo of our training for groups of 5 or more at www.teachucomp.com/enterprise-licensing.